This is the Kitchen Sink WP Podcast, episode 377.
I program my home computer.
We have a server crash. 404 error. Page not found. Links aren't working. System is crashing. System is crashing. System is crashing.
Your old HTML website. Barely alive. We have the technology. We have WordPress. A new website. Better than it was before. Better. Stronger.
Faster.
Why, hello everybody, this is Adam Silver, the host of the Kitchen Sink WP Podcast. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. All right, upcoming events. We have one event next weekend, WordCamp Northeast Ohio region, May 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. I'm going to try to check in on this one. I've been to this WordCamp a few times back in the day when we were in person. It was awesome. I did a battle there with Mr. Kyle Maurer. Had a great time, and it's a great group of people, so check that out. And that is it. Yeah, that's it for upcoming events, and no one shared any jobs this week. So moving on to segment one. In the news, two things to talk about here. First and foremost, GiveWP was acquired by Liquid Web. GiveWP is a donation plugin. It's awesome. We use it a lot here over at my agency, and Liquid Web is a hosting company, and I know a lot of people there. So congratulations to both sides of that, and to Devin and Matt and team. Michelle Frechette is there. Ben Meredith is over there. So awesome to everybody, and best of luck there. All right. Also in the news, there was a proposal that was put out by Andrea Middleton about adding a vaccination status to the in-person meetup safety checklist. And it's over on the, is it on the Make? I think so. Yeah, it's on the make.wordpress.org community page. I'll put a link in the show notes. There's a conversation going on about it, what that might mean for organizers, etc. Interesting. Take a listen. Take a read, and chime in if you have any thoughts and feedback. She would like to hear from you as well. So, is that it in the news? That is it in the news, yes. Moving on to the meat and potatoes of this week's episode. This week, I wanted to talk about best practices and the client wish and how they may not work out in a custom relationship, or how it's kind of a convoluted topic here per se, but best practices. Okay, so starting with a definition. What are best practices? Well, of course, it depends. Now, the standard definition is, and I quote, commercial or professional procedures that are accepted or prescribed as being correct or most effective. Okay, pretty standard thing there. But of course, there are many sub areas for each and every business type, what might be a best practice, okay? It could be anything as simple as answering your phone and making it easy for people to pay you, right? Or even to be able to take certain types of payments if that's how they want to pay, by check or cash or charge. The answering your phone thing, by the way, if that's your marketing thing, you should answer your phone. Plain and simple. It's also the overall process in running a business itself, working with contractors. And for argument's sake, let's say a client wants to make a change to a project that's way outside of being best practice. I don't know, perhaps using multiple sliders plugins, or using CSS in 4 different places, or making a functional change to the site on a live server versus a dev server, or even the staging server for that matter. Because there are differences there, and there are best practices on how to handle this. So what do we do? How do we get past this as developers and agency owners? At the end of the day, quote, the client is right, end quote, right? Is the client always right? Isn't that the customer is always right? They're the one paying the bill, so shouldn't they get what they want? Well, my answer there is maybe. It's a yes, well, with caveats. Okay, so all that said, here are 3 things to consider from experience when it comes to best practices and working with clients. Number 1, listen to the wants first. Respond to the needs second. Okay, I recommend you never really go into a discussion with a wholehearted 100% solution until you've fully vetted what the client's want. Okay, the client's hired you or your agency for a reason, because it's tied to a specific want. Okay, the want is very important to them. In fact, someone on their team has probably already spent a lot of time trying to understand it. And because of this, it's important that we listen to it and probe every which way we can and ask all the questions of their intended want. Okay, this shows the client that you're listening, you're understanding, and then only when they feel they've gotten that information from you, they get that feeling, if you need to, you can present an alternative solution. You can present what's the best practice from your experience running the business the way you run it, meaning being in the industry of choice here, being in WordPress. We have the experience to present the alternative solution. Okay, if you do the opposite of this, if you say, no, that's not how we're going to do it, because of X, Y, and Z. It's your prerogative, yes, but you also may find yourself losing the client, and you have to be ready for that. Okay, so that's number one. Listen to the wants, respond to the needs. Okay, number two, manage the customer expectations. Now, customers often expect the world, but promising that is not a great tactic. It's not a best practice. What happens when you can't keep the promise? So I recommend that you be transparent with customers. Tell them exactly what they expect and work hard to exceed that. When the customer, when the client sees your business is willing to go the extra mile, they're going to stay loyal. So the best practice here is manage that. Manage the expectations up front from the get-go. Trust me here, because it happens all the time. Okay. And actually, I want to add to this little section, like a 2B here. I've actually reached out and asked a few colleagues about this, about kind of like what they do. And the majority of the replies I got when I asked the question, like, when do you give in to the client? Everyone leaned towards keeping the peace. If it was an easy remedy, though it wasn't part of a best practice, they would just do it. If the request was so far out of left field, they would then advise a client and then require them to sign off on their decision as needed. Because being a pushover can lead to problems down the road. If you just say yes to everything, you're asking for trouble in the future, for future work, for future projects, etc. It's a trickle-down effect, and we've been there as well. Okay. Now, be ready. This is number 3. Okay. Be ready to compromise on the work. Now, clients and services can be a hard mix. We've all experienced it. If you haven't had this experience, if you had just easy, nothing but the best clients and it's super easy to work with, I envy you to no end. I've had that a lot, and I've also had not that. I've had the opposite. So am I going to give in to the client's request, giving them the proverbial win? Yes, I am. If it's a minor lack of best practice, sure, I might give in. But, this is the big but here, I'm going to give in this time. And I'm going to make sure that they know the stake of what's at stake. And I'm going to make sure that their stakeholders, the people in charge at their company, at the client side of things, are well aware of my concerns as my agency owner, as myself, as the agency owner in my own place. And I'm not going to be held responsible for what they may have caused a problem downstream. Okay. So number 3, again, be ready to work for a compromise. You can give in, but you want to cover your butt. That's at the end of the story. At the end of the day, that's the key. You want to make sure that you are protected, that you're not going to be blamed for this. Have them sign off. Come up with a new form, a way to document this in an email, on a form, in a PDF somehow, and get it in writing that they're aware of that what they are agreeing to do, have you do for them. That's not in best practice. Okay. And again, best practices is a pretty wide statement because it covers in every industry in every which different way as well. So there you go. Clearly, I'm a little excited about this because this recently happened, but we're giving the client the win. At the end of the day, the client's going to win, but we're going to make sure we are protected as well. So I'm curious, how do you deal with this? Do you give the client the win, or do you just push back and say, no, we won't do that, period, with any outcome of loss of client, loss of project, or does the client just, go with you as well? And again, keep in mind, I've also pushed back sometimes, and the client then realizes their mistake, and they do listen to us, and they do go forward with our recommendations because we are the expert. But there has to be that balance, and sometimes clients don't want to see that. They don't see it at all. So again, I'm curious. How do you deal with it? Let me know. Shoot me an email on that. Okay. Or reach out on social as well. All right, moving on. Segment 3, tip and tool of the week. This week's tip, it's actually a podcast episode from the WP Briefing podcast with Josepha. She chatted last week with Matt Mullenweg about the relaunch of CC Search, which is now going to be called Openverse, and all the facets about the open source ecosystem. A really interesting discussion that they had together. So take a listen. I could try to explain it, but it's already recorded by somebody else. So I'll put a link in the show notes and take a listen to that one. And I think you'll enjoy listening to it. All right. That is it for this week. If you have any questions, go ahead, send it in via email, adam@KitchensinkWP.com, or use the SpeakPipe function on the website. If you want to support the show, become a Patreon. I would love it. If you want to sponsor the show, become a sponsor. Form on the website. I would love that too. If you're looking for some coaching on getting your business launched, check me out over at adamsilver.com. Thanks for listening. See you next week. Now go out and do some awesome things with WordPress. All right. Bye-bye.